All right. Good evening. Welcome to the June 26th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. We're going to forego my usual soliloquy on why we're here. You guys all know why we're here. So welcome, and we'll start the meeting with the introduction of the commissioners.
Susan Athenson.
John Travers.
Bill Ransom.
Kurt Pairitz.
Jim Preschlack.
Robert Alfe.
All right. We have no minutes for this evening. Our first agenda item for this evening will be 881 Rosemary Road. So if you folks want to come up and tell us what you got. It's a request for Certificate of Appropriateness for the replacement of existing entrance pillars. I'll ask if anybody has any conflict on this. And I
Oh, five first.
Thanks.
Okay, as you know, we were here in about a year and a half ago.
Welcome back.
Petitioning for a new demolition of a home and a new home. And we thank you for the certificate. I'm Mike Tracy, and that's Mike Tracy. So I'm helping Mike through the building process here. And what we're petitioning to do is install or remove the existing wooden piers that are located on the driveway on the south side or the north side of the property. And our intent is to replace it with a single address pier. What we know about the property is that there's really not much historical significance since this property was subdivided in the 60s. And they're more or less designed to match the house that we removed. I think it was, this property was part of the, is that a Howard Van Doren Shaw house that's sitting right in front of it? I don't really think there's any historical significance to saving them. What we are petitioning to install is, this just shows the condition of the piers. They're in need of work or rebuilding if we were to maintain them. And I don't feel that it fits the house, so I had asked David Paulton to design me a pier that'd be more appropriate and blend with the house a little more. Just more of an address identifier. So we're replacing the wooden piers with brick and limestone piers. They'll be hand-forged wrought iron with an address plaque. What we didn't show is the side elevation. What we intended on doing was stuffing a mailbox in the side. So you really wouldn't see it from the street, but the mailman, rather than have a separate post, we opted to go with a single post pier rather than a double because of the tree on the west side of the property. There's a substantial tree that we didn't want to impact. So that's why we're going with a single pier. Eventually, we plan on lighting it, but not right now. We don't have a plan for the lighting, but our plan will be to set a light on the 881.
All right. Thank you very much. Kathy, do we have a staff report for this one?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Anybody?
Just a couple quick comments. The petitioner mentioned that this property was before the commission back in 2011. There was an existing house on the property that was built in 1963. The commission at that time did grant a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition and the replacement structure that is pretty much near completion, if not completely finished on the property today. Back in 2011, there was a brief discussion about the pillars at the front of the lot, but since a plan really wasn't fully developed for the commission to take action on, the commission requested that as these plans are developed, the project come back to the commission for review of the entrance pillars. The existing pillars appear to be associated with the house that was demolished with the current building project. They do sit within the city parkway, the right-of-way area. So this project does pull the pillar back to be in compliance with code requirements. The materials, the brick, the limestone, are all drawn from the main house that sits back behind the lot to the front. Staff is recommending approval of the project. There are findings in support of the project in your staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you very much. Now's an opportunity for the commissioners to ask questions to either the staff or the petitioner, if there are any questions.
I have a question. The diagram we're seeing, that's facing the street, or we're looking at it from the
Correct.
street. It seemed like there was a lot of landscaping there just to the side of it,
Right.
which might encroach on the bracket of numbers that are hanging out there. Has any thought been given to that?
I don't know if you've been by there. I put a
I did.
stake in the ground, which
Yeah.
would be about approximately the center of the pier. And
Yeah,
I believe we're still gonna be within a couple of feet of the plantings that we had installed on the, east side of the property, so I think it'll,
okay, so that, you had considered that, is what
Yeah.
I'm hearing. Additionally, the petition I had said that there's no illumination planned, but
Right.
in your presentation, you said you may add that.
we may add lighting, just a landscape light to, light up the address at night.
Okay, and would that change our approval at all, or would they have to come back to that for something, back to us for something like that?
Typically, the commission has reviewed those types of requests together. I think in other cases, a single low-light beam on an address has been supported and would be appropriate on the streetscape. So based on your discussion this evening, you can either allow that to occur at the staff level through a building permit or require that lighting come back.
Okay, just so the petitioner understands, the petition before us is not with illumination, so if we don't add that condition, they'd be coming back to us with that, if they wanted to do that later?
The commission, based on your discussion, could condition your approval this evening so that wouldn't have to happen. I think you can maybe,
So let me ask a little different way. If we were not seeing this house, if there was no change to this house and somebody wanted to put a light on a existing address pillar, they would go to the staff, they would request that. The only reason we're seeing this is because it was part of a larger certificate of appropriateness, right?
if there's a significant change to the streetscape, those projects would come back before the commission.
Okay,
There certainly are lighting plans that are approved without
I see.
consideration by the commission.
Okay.
And typically, those are low light.
Got it.
I'm not sure I wanted to come back. Okay, that's,
A lot, the house is it's a lot in-depth house.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even know the driveway is there at night. It's pretty dark there, so
and,
we would,
yeah,
we would
I'm
like
just
you to
trying to
consider
think,
illumination, and it would be a low light,
Yeah.
nothing that's gonna, probably a 20-watter or something like that.
right, but the petition that we're you understand from
I
our point,
understand
the
that.
petition that we're approving had no illumination in it. So if
Right.
we just, approve it like that, I'm just wondering where that puts you. And I'm not, that's probably a discussion area for the.
Yeah, well, let's finish our questions, if we
Yeah.
have any other ones on this, and then we can get into the deliberation. Any other questions for the petitioner?
Just have one.
Sure.
Just curiosity, what is the reason you chose to make it to the left side rather than, not on the driveway, but I mean, having the bracket closer to the drive?
No, the bracket is actually away from the drive.
Yeah, I was just wondering why that side versus the other side?
You talking about the east or the west side?
Well,
Yeah, in other words, the bracket coming out the right-hand side of the pier.
as I indicated earlier, we planned on putting a mailbox on the opposite side
Oh,
so that it can be accessed maybe with a stepping stone. If it's a few feet from the driveway, I could just lay a bluestone paver there and the postman could, access the mailbox that way. I actually gave this to Dave Polton, and I said, design me a appropriate pier that no one else has in town, and that's something that will look appropriate to the design that he put together on the house, and this is what they came up with. And as far as the address being on the east side, if you have a preference, I just feel that the mailbox
Would
on the,
conflict with it, yeah.
would
I just thought it
conflict.
might be more visible on the right-hand side from the street than the left, but
Any other,
mailbox would be in the way.
any other questions or comments? Questions, sorry. Now's an opportunity for the public to ask or have any testimony if they have any. And I see none, so we can deliberate. Yay. I just have a couple questions
Okay.
or comments for you. This driveway is skewed far to the right side of the property as you're looking at the street, right? So that is one reason why I could see the architect might put the address on the left side. That's
Yeah.
where the bulk of the yard is, and I understand the mailbox too. I would encourage staff, when they finally review the actual drawings for this, I assume you would do that, to make sure the mailbox is detailed appropriately so it doesn't fall apart, but I know Mike wouldn't let that happen anyway.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I think it's great. Frankly, I'd like to hear just really quickly Commissioner's comments on lighting. I'd be happy to empower the staff with respect to that to do something in their judgment that was quite a low-level light. If they thought that it was something that we should see, they obviously could direct it back to us. So I'd be happy to include that in the petition.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. I was just asking the question, so it
No,
doesn't, something that,
I
like, that
appreciate it.
doesn't come back to us.
It's your time and ours, so.
Yeah, right.
But it's definitely not going on the pier itself, so.
No, I'd say something in the landscaping that is appropriate to staff's. Any other deliberations, comments?
I think it's beautiful.
Great, nicely done. I would entertain a motion if there was one.
Oh, I move that the commission approve the petition for a certificate of appropriateness for the removal of the existing wood entrance pillars at 881 Rosemary Road and replacement with a single non-illuminated pillar based on the findings as stated on pages 1 and 2 of the applicable report by city staff dated June 26, 2013. And it is the commission's understanding that illumination of the, future illumination of the pillar will be subject to, at a low level, will be subject to staff's consideration.
All right, the motion's been made by Commissioner Travers. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Ransom. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And congratulations.
Thank
Good
you.
luck with that. All right. Let's see, do we have our,
1090 North Sheridan?
yeah, I think so. So we'll return to the number 4 agenda item, which is a request for a certificate of appropriateness for an addition and alteration to a resident at 1090 North Sheridan Road. And I'll ask if any of the commissioners have any conflict on this.
No.
None, so come on forward and tell us what you got.
Okay, I apologize.
It's no problem, the guys before you were happy to get out early.
Okay.
Yes.
I might need some assistance in getting this on here. Getting the software up. I'm a Mac guy, not a PC guy. Here we are. That's the file, so if you don't mind. PowerPoint and PDF, just in case. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you again. My name is Rob Douglas. I'm an architect here in Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area here, and I'm representing Tom and Tish Hunter for their addition and remodeling to their house. I'll run you through some quick images here. Here's the front entrance, or the front elevation of the house as you view it from the base of the driveway. And as we start walking around the house to the north, here is the first area which will have a colonnade element along the north side of the house, which will also accommodate new storage areas. As you can see here, they're currently just locker-like units, will fully integrated into the composition of the house along this edge. As we come around to the back of the house, this is where the proposed addition will take place. You can see the stakes here depicting the edges of the new construction. This is actually where the open air porch would be. So as we continue around, We've identified the area where the addition will take place, which will be north of this projection here, which is currently the formal dining room. And then going down to the south side of the house, which is now getting down toward the ravine edge, there'll be nothing occurring in this area. So we're a significant distance from any ravine edge. So as you can see it here on the survey, there's the ravine edge right here with this heavy dotted line. So all the activity is occurring up here as depicted with this site plan. The black pochette are the proposed additions, the gray is the existing. So one thing we do have here, and I got to zoom in on this a little bit more, the proposed landscaping along the north edge. It's already heavily foliated with evergreen material, but Mariani Landscaping has come in to develop some concepts here as far as having to help reinforce any kind of landscape buffering along the north property line to protect the privacy of the neighbor to the north. And this is just first floor, second floor footprints, and this is more actually for the bulk calculations, but it does show you, at least on the ground floor, how it's currently configured with the existing kitchen in here, and then a small room in back and a full bath. This is all coming out for the addition. And these are existing conditions of the building right now, which has a mansard roof on it, brick first floor, and it's all pretty straightforward here. So I think what I'll do is just move right into the addition. The heavy pochette here is the proposed addition being put on the northwest corner of the house, and then the addition of this colonnade element here, which also will be infilled with some solids, which will be the storage. And here it is on the first floor. We've also identified the setback line here along the north property, so everything's within the setback. The porch elements do come relatively close to the setback, but once again, everything's within the setbacks as per zoning requirements. And here's, the kitchen area has been taken out, and now this is becoming a family room with a new kitchen back this way with a back hall. Elevations to the building, the front elevation to tie into the portico element along the north property line. We are going to bring, or I should say a colonnade over here. We're going to introduce a portico at the front. Currently there is no covered entrance to the front door, so this will allow for some protection for guests when they do arrive at the house. This is the south elevation of the building. Here you can see the new portico for the front door, and then right here is the addition of the family room as it comes out to the west on the rear of the building. You'll also note that the height of the ridge here of the proposed addition is lower than the main building, so it is playing a subservient role to the massing of the building. Here's the north elevation with the colonnade element along here, and then these three middle bays are solid panels which will accommodate storage, with the middle section being the access into it. Open air elements will occur here, so one can store other things, but it'll be under a sheltered environment. Here's the wing from the north of the family room coming out on the back side of the building, and the new fireplace, which will be in the family room. Here's your view once again on the west elevation. This is the existing dormer up above, and that was really driving how this addition could engage the building without impacting that element. Here's the family room wing, and then an open air porch element here, once again to help break down, the massing of the building. And that is, I don't know if I can back up now. well, that is the conclusion of what we have here as far as our presentation. It is a pretty straightforward addition, no variances being requested, and I guess we're really open for any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. Do we have a staff report?
Just a real brief reiteration of what the petitioner just mentioned. This is a pretty simple project to expand the home to the rear and gain some additional storage space in the garage, as well as provide a covered entry to the front. There are no variances requested. It complies with building scale requirements. It complies with setback requirements. There's a review of the ordinances from, the standards in the ordinance in your staff report, and we are recommending approval. To answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions from the commissioners?
Hey, Rob, I got a question for you. We got a correspondence that questioned the height of the new chimney, and I just wanted to get your perspective on the proportionality of it, how you sized it, and how you thought of it in relation to the new addition and the existing chimney and the structure just in general.
So-
Okay, well,
So just to clarify, the question actually was referencing the existing chimney, not the new chimney.
No, the new chimney.
Well, she said southern exposure, southern
She did say
elevation.
southern.
I think she was talking about the existing chimney.
But she's from the south.
I see. So maybe the view from the south.
I mean, you
Yeah,
know.
it was confusing.
Okay, well,
Well, I think it.
Take a shot
yeah, the
anyway.
question- no, I guess the question is just how the two chimneys interact in the new design and how you came up with the size appropriateness of the new one and.
Well, here is the existing chimney. The proposed one is slightly shorter. It's really driven by code on having it clear more than 3 feet above anything. I forgot the distances involved offhand, but you have to get the chimney tall enough so it'll actually draw properly from any other elements near it. So that's really how the height was generated. It is shorter than the existing one to the south. It's really kind of more of a code-driven variable of, gosh, I'm telling you, I'm sorry, I can't recall the numbers right now, but it typically 3 feet above the ridge line, and I think it's somewhere between 10 to 12 feet away from anything taller than that. So you don't get backdraft problems into the chimney. So I can tell you that's how it, the height of the chimney was determined. Beyond that, I'm not sure what else I can really add.
No, thanks. I would appreciate it.
any other questions?
Couple.
Sure. Yep, go for it.
On the front portico, there are currently a couple of lights there now. What is the plan for the two sconce lights on either side of the door? Are you gonna do something different there, or?
It hasn't been fully developed yet, but, and I do have the homeowner here, but if I might be so bold, I would suggest probably can light, recessed lighting.
There are some can lights on the garage, so to keep that similar, the front door can lights, all purposes need the same one.
Okay. The other question I had, well, two, you're taking out all the beveled soffit then all the way around the house?
That's what we're proposing to do here. That 45-degree angle is rather, well, it's unarticulated area that I think lends the opportunity to create a shadow line in there.
Yeah, no, I
which-
think it's an improvement. I just,
Yeah.
For
you
sure,
know,
I didn't
yeah.
even notice that until you, yeah. But I like that a lot, actually.
Well, at least based on what we've been able to determine, there's no reason for that 45 to be there from a structural standpoint. So, to create a shadow line around the house separating the wall from the
Right.
mansard roof, I think it certainly lends for a nice, at least improvement the best we can with that current condition.
Now, the third and final question is, I'm a little confused on the rear elevation, the part of the family room that's between the two wings that stick out is moving forward, right?
This area here, yes. That
But I
is-
mean, shouldn't something different be happening with the roof then?
That
'Cause
is
that
a-
looks the same way it is now. I'm trying to figure out how that would happen.
That is a flat roof, similar to the flat roof on this side.
Well, I see, there's a flat roof over the extension?
Correct.
Oh, okay, now I get it.
Or, I shouldn't say literally flat, it'll be a very shallow
Yeah.
pitch on it, but it'll be perceived as a flat roof.
I see. Okay.
Good catch. Any other questions?
Just a quick question on your landscape plan. I guess it was the proposed screening, and there was a kind of a jagged line, and it's marked as arborvitae screening. Is that what that's supposed to be?
Unfortunately, I can't really read it from here, but I believe it's an arborvitae hedge that Mariani Landscaping is recommending there.
Okay, I've never seen it drawn that way. It's not a wall or anything, is it?
I'm sorry?
It's not a wall, it's,
No,
That's
it's
arborvitae
landscape
hedge,
material.
yeah.
It'll be done in an evergreen hedge.
So it says arborvitae on the drawings. I can't quite
Yeah,
make it out.
just
The
unusual.
height is listed there too, and I can't.
It's hard to see on the screen there.
3 feet or
I
5?
don't know that it would be substantial enough to block the view. The idea was not to have a straight wall there,
Sure,
just a wall of arborvitae, not.
okay.
okay.
Proximate height?
I mean, it was just, it has some movement in it, so
Sure,
it doesn't look completely staged.
yeah.
Is it 5 feet, Tom, or what's the
It
height?
says 10.
10 to 12 feet.
10 to 12.
Okay. And then you're not changing the configuration of the driveway, are you?
No,
It's the
no,
same,
there's,
okay.
except for, a slight modification along the north edge of the existing house right now. Everything else remains the same.
Okay. That's it.
Any other questions? And now's an opportunity if there's any testimony from the public. And I see none, so I'll ask if there's deliberations. If you'd
I
like.
think my only issue was that southern chimney that the neighbor
Yeah.
had. But, there's so much screening on that
Yeah.
southern side.
It's
I
really
don't even know how
difficult
they
to see
it.
this
Yeah.
from anywhere else but in the backyard.
I mean, yeah, it's beautiful on that
Yeah.
side. But I don't think that's an issue at this point.
I too, that was, I was hoping that the neighbor would be here so I could try and figure out what the problem is. I couldn't see it.
Okay. All right, yeah, I mean, it looks like it's a nice improvement to the residents. I don't have any problem with it myself. Anybody else?
No, nice improvement.
Yeah, no, it's nice design. I'm supportive of it.
All right, I'll ask if there's a motion.
I move we approve the petition as presented.
There's a motion by Commissioners Athenson,
Seconded?
seconded by Commissioner Preschlack. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Congratulations. I just thought it was good that I was able to get your last name. I know I did, almost did. Nice. My mental block. All right. Moving along, our next request is a consideration for a certificate of appropriateness for the replacement, nope, did that one. Certificate of appropriateness for the addition of dormers and modifications of the front entrance at 780 Barbary Lane. And I'll ask the commissioners once again if there's any conflict. And I see none, so tell us what you got.
Good evening, I'm Ralph Hoffman, here representing Michael and Joan Burke. And what we're proposing to do is, in our continued attempt to bring additional charm to this house that was built in 1985. I was here 2 months ago, and you guys approved the back where we added some windows. Now we're proposing to add dormers to the existing front elevation of the house. So here, so this is how it's currently existing. A very steep and large roof facing the primary, street. What we'd like to do is to add the dormers to break up that sort of steep slope of a roof, add charm. The dormers, it's actually attic space. It's unconditioned storage above the garage. We're seeing the back of the garage. the slope of the roof comes down to almost 4.5 to 5 feet off grade, so it's really low at the bottom end. And so to add a little more proportion, to break up the overall mass of that roof, we feel that the dormers would help in that regard, as well as provide some fenestration, some windows, even though they're not being used to illuminate living space. It would give that sense from the front of the building. Tied to that, we're proposing to infill a little section of the roof right at this area over an existing bay window. That roof, that eave line pops up and down. And the reason for that is really tied back to the dormers. Once we played with a different number of dormers and spacing them across that elevation, it became sort of problematic to have that little opening above the bay window. That combined with the fact that this is in fact a service entrance to laundry, the homeowner wants to sort of really downplay that. They don't want their guests to mistakenly go there thinking it's the front door. So to fill in that roof and sort of create a stronger shadow line, it would, we believe, will sort of minimize that from happening. So that's the front elevation, that's the south elevation. Additionally, once the other work that we're proposing to do is at the front door to change the existing details around the overhang here. The large bay area is really a landing for the stair going up to the second floor. That's has a couple of wood, decorative wood brackets, and then just the bluestone step right there. The issue that we feel that we're trying to correct here is that it's really top heavy, and there's no real charm that it possesses. So by removing the brackets and putting in some limestone columns, changing the soldier course of brick and adding a sort of a corresponding limestone capital there, wrapping around, and swapping out the existing bay window for a series of four casement windows in the same width at the masonry opening. We would change the sill height a little bit to give us room to put in a planning box. All of those elements do a number of things for us. They take away from this sort of top-heavy feeling that you have when you're out in front of it and approaching the front door, as well as adding all the additional detail that will add to the sort of overall charm that the homeowner is trying to bring to the exterior of this home. So those are the three sort of four, if you include the changing of the bay window as it's described, to just a series of casement windows that we're proposing to do to the exterior of this home. And I should also point out that this front entrance is actually inside this courtyard, so you'd have to kind of drive in to even see it. Yes, the neighbor to the west obviously has a view from their second floor into this space, but we still feel, and the homeowner still wishes to really change the character of that in a direction that is more appropriate to the overall home.
All right, thank you. Look for a staff report.
Thank you, Chairman. In general, the proposed changes to the structure, which is a non-contributing structure. The home was built in the 80s. I think the proposed changes do have merit and some merit in considering adding dormers and adding some more traditional detailing to the entrances and the windows. And there are positive findings in your staff report, but I guess I would like to focus my comments on the addition of the dormers, and just ask that the commission provide some comment and direction on the placement of the dormers, the size of the dormers, and weigh in on the appropriateness of that aspect of this project as the details are refined with respect to the project. Along those lines, the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation actually reviewed, as they do all of the petitions that go before the commission. They did provide a pretty detailed memo to the commission that offers some good suggestions in order to really hone in on the details and make sure that as this project is completed, a traditional feel to the structure is achieved. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I'll leave my comments at that.
All right, thanks very much.
Yeah, Megan, I have a question. You know, I'm just taking a step back here a little bit and just was curious as to the appropriate balance between designing this petition and reviewing it to ensure that it's in keeping with the character and the ordinance of the HPC. And so I always get a little bit reluctant to, you know, to micromanage projects and designs. So I guess the question is, you know, is that a big, you're directing us to focus in on a design element and to come up with maybe potential alternatives, and I'm just wondering, I want to push back on that a little bit and question if that's the primary role of our review process, one. And then two, just in general, if you take a step back on this commission, is it in keeping with all the design guidelines that are articulated in our ordinance today?
The commission's role is absolutely to weigh in on the detailing, the appropriateness of a design element, of massing, of this type of change. I think that is certainly within the purview of the commission to provide input and direction on. With respect to the consistency with the ordinance standards, the addition of dormers, I think it does add some balance to the facade, which is one of the standards that the commission looks at. So I think there's merit in looking at the concept of adding dormers to the roof. I think what the commission can provide input on is, are they the right size? Are they the right material? Are they in the right location? And that would be appropriate for the commission to comment on.
So, so let me follow that up with a question to the petitioner, which is, in generating this plan for these 4 dormers, let's just talk about the dormers. We love to talk about dormers, by the way. Did you consider other alternatives? How carefully did you study, you know, the layout? Why did you locate them the way that you did? And I don't know if you had an opportunity to get a copy of what was written by the Preservation Foundation, but let me just give you the high points.
Sure.
The high points were basically that they thought that there was some merit in the addition, as Megan suggested. They were concerned with the ridgeline of the dormer being as high as the ridgeline of the house, and the concept there being that the dormer should be subservient to the main house, come down a little bit, you know, and a bigger problem with that than frankly just that relationship is just the perception from the ground as they move away changes quite dramatically. And we saw that really with, we never had an opportunity to see that any clearer than when they put the dormers on the train station, because we saw them in the parking lot on the ground and they were massive, and then they threw them up on the roof and they look little small things.
Right,
You know?
right.
So really, you know, it's one of the problems with looking at a drawing in 2 dimensions like this, is that we have to kind of think about them in 3 dimensions. But you've actually provided that drawing at the upper left-hand corner, which is very illustrative, because it shows how those dormers, at least in the eye of the folks at the Preservation Foundation, and I would have to agree with this, feel like they're a little bit high on the roof because of that placement. There's a couple other things that they pointed out, and then I have one of my own. They were wondering if they were a little bit wide, because you, particularly at this entrance gate, have these 2 references that are quite narrow, and they seem like they're in a little bit of in conflict relationship-wise with that. I'm not sure if that's why they, you know, got to that point, or if that's just something I am implying. The other one that I'm looking at, and I'm wondering, scratching my head a little bit, remember this is a question, is the dormer over the top of the gate. It kind of has a little bit of a, I won't call it a rocket ship effect, but it seems like that there's a relationship there that might be, work better in a different way. So there's my question. What do you think?
Sure, to start at the top. Yes, we actually looked at, one of the reasons I'm here today, and this wasn't part of the last time I was here, was because we were looking at a number of different scenarios, and the homeowner was having a really difficult time deciding. So we looked at different types of dormers, different numbers of them, different placements across the roof. Everything from one larger one in the center and not doing these the other pair, to what did 3 of them across the elevation do for us? And at the end of the day, this scheme ended up being what we sort of landed on, and that the homeowner felt was that they like to see on the front of their house. And so so then the placement, yes, so then it became an exercise of how do you distribute them across the roof with a minimal need for changing roof lines and the rest of the roof. So starting with, it seemed logical that we would center this one here, center a pair, bringing them closer together so that they made sense with the width of this roof, and then basically taking that and flipping it over, which then led us to dealing with this eave line to make it all work symmetrically across the roof. This is a photo of the existing dormers on the back of the house. We are proposing to do a hip roof here as opposed to just a gabled roof, which is what the other existing dormers have, but the hip roof is consistent with the little hips on the other little dormers flanking the drive. It also allows, visually, as you're perceiving this, as a human down at the street level or in the front yard, it is minimizing that tension between the ridge lines. It's masking that. I mean, it's obvious here in a straight-on elevation, but very few people will have that perspective. To address the question of where up and down the slope we landed in terms of setting these dormers and the scale of the dormer, they are inset dormers, which allowed us to go a little bit larger and push them up the slope. It is a challenging condition because of the height of this eave line and then the change of this eave line. If these were brought down a little bit down the slope, we'd sort of give away the trick, meaning I think people would realize, what kind of habitable space really could possibly exist beyond that, because they would be far enough down the slope it wouldn't make any logical sense that they would be existing, because they would, the sill would be below the floor line. And we wanted to keep them all at the same elevation up the slope. So when we introduced the 2 on the sides, that sort of pushed us up the roof line a little bit, but then they became really large, so we did an inset. We pushed them into the slope a little in order to bring them down. So it was really this exercise of
Sure.
Stretching in a number of directions to try to get it to a place where we feel that proportionally they would be large enough to be effective, but not too large that they would look odd. And so that's kind of, I don't know if did I?
No, that's good.
answer
I
them all?
appreciate the walk through it. And then one other observation that was made in this letter was that if you did make them narrower, that would by default bring down the ridge line of the dormer. Just so, for example, if you made that dormer, 12 inches narrower, the ridge line comes down with it because doesn't have to go as far, right?
Exactly.
So, well, I'll just share with you that question for now. Any other questions from the petitioners or commissioners?
I just want to go back to alternatives because this is really a tough one, and you want to de-emphasize that service door because it does look like the front entry. So, anything else in terms of that you thought of besides dormers?
On the front elevation?
Yeah, to de-emphasize that service entrance, maybe even, you don't want to bring the roof line up. That's almost too much work, but did you think about that?
Yeah, well, we did. We looked at that. We actually looked at putting, creating like a little porch with columns and
Yeah.
stuff. There's proposed there's landscaping out in front of that, which I'm not showing on this elevation. So a combination of the eave, if we peel the eave back, because this is a south-facing elevation, then the concern is that the sun is going to light and call more attention to that location. But by filling in that eave, and it's about a 24, it's not deep enough to turn it into a porch per se, but it's deep enough to cast enough of a shadow line that hopefully that will help not draw attention, to minimize the attention that and that people might mistakenly go to that as opposed to. I mean, admittedly, it is challenging because people are also intimidated to drive through.
Right.
Like, people
It's narrow.
don't feel comfortable. It's like, where do I, where is the front door? And so that's a positive and a negative, depending on. I mean, the homeowner finds that a positive because who likes solicitors, and so. Or unwelcomed guests, but nevertheless, yeah, we felt that adding in that eave actually helped lengthen that shadow line and sort of put that whole area,
Darken it. Yeah.
And then that combined with the landscaping in front of it will hopefully minimize
Okay.
the visibility of it.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. But fortunately, it works with the height of the bay window. We can take the existing bay window roof off, and then that would, with some trim work, it will just go right to the underside of the new soffit.
Okay, I think that was one of the concerns you had, Megan, about how that was going to
So-
work. Okay.
That will be a easy transition to make. So.
Okay.
Other questions?
I had one question. I just wanted to make sure that I understood that the space behind these dormers is unfinished attic space, and it's not under contemplation at all that would be finished and used for living space.
No. I mean, yes, it is unfinished, unconditioned attic space, and the homeowner is not contemplating on converting it into. That would be a project clearly unto itself for a number of reasons. One of which is just behind. So this is the existing kitchen over on this end. So behind here is a breakfast dining area that has a vaulted ceiling inside of it that is carved out up into the attic space. So to get from the existing second floor, which is beyond, through and into this space, there would be a large amount of rework on the inside to make that possible. Yes, you can get up there because it is storage, and it's through the garage. So this here is the back of a two-stall garage, and then this is the back of a single-stall garage, all of which the garage doors are all facing the inside of the courtyard. And so, yeah. And to answer your question, there's no intent to turn that into habitable space.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I see none. It's an opportunity for the public. If there's any comments from the public, please come on up and introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rami Lopat, and I'm here tonight to represent the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation. In fact, I should say my fellow board member, Alice Moulton-Ely, is also here, and she will be addressing you on the Maplewood petition. Mr. Chairman, you did reiterate some of the concerns of the foundation, and very nicely, I might add.
Just read the letter.
So on that first point, we are concerned about the dormers and the height of those dormers in relationship to the roof line and the width of those dormers. And I should say that I did not take part in this opinion that we presented to you tonight. But I do want to say that our board is always very concerned. We understand how important these deliberations are to architects and the owners, obviously. And we take these petitions very seriously, and these positions tonight were the result of back and forth that I read among many of our board members. I was really quite impressed with the detail and the thought that they put into them. And to blow all that out of the window, I was kind of wondering why those middle dormers those two middle dormers might not be connected into one wide dormer to mimic the width of that entry and even maybe an eyebrow effect to mimic the garage arc. But anyway, the three other comments that we had were that the proposed changes to the front entry improve an awkward ensemble of architectural elements by simplifying them and eliminating the cantilevers of the second floor and the bay window. The proposed window over the door, we find, is much more in keeping with the English cottage style than the existing bay window. Third, with regard to the added columns, the petitioner should follow the traditional rules of the classical order. We found that the shaft of that column right now the columns are set too far under the entablature of that column. We were looking to align the shaft of the column with the face of the architrave above it. It's a small detail, but one that we thought was important. And last, the change to the roof at the secondary entrance doesn't appear necessary, but we don't find it objectionable either. So thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you. Any other public testimony? And I see none, so we can deliberate. I will say that I do want to just reinforce the notion that Rami was talking about, that I think we are seeing nice improvements to this home in general, so this is all great stuff. So forgive us our nitpick, but we might continue to do it. But I think that it's nice to see these improvements being made. What do you think, folks? What deliberations do we have?
Well, have you considered if you do narrow those dormers and bring the height down, it definitely, maybe even you go with 3 in the middle. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, sometimes it
don't.
helps with a petition if we've seen, different alternatives
Yeah.
to weigh, what is appropriate. In this case, one of the problems with the dormers that I'm having is that there's different things going on with the roof, in different sections. We got the low eaves in the middle, we got it very heavily weighted to the east side, we have those flanking column dormers on the west side, and so there doesn't seem to be a cohesiveness to this, and adding the dormers, I understand, breaking up the mass, and I and bringing interest to it, and I think that's great, but maybe it's bringing too much interest to it. I have to say that I agree with the things that the Preservation Foundation said, that they're seem to be too high on the roof, especially when you measure it from the low eave right in the middle. So Yeah, I think, you know, making them a little bit smaller, lowering them a little bit may go a long way to, you know, to making them more acceptable. You know, that's just, you know, my feeling about it.
Jim?
Well, I mean, I think you guys will know how I feel. I mean, you know, I want to I want to err on the homeowner's side of this petition, I think for a couple of reasons. One, you know, I think the design is a big improvement. I think it's in character with the home and the neighborhood and the general, you know, feel of the town. It's not a contributing structure. I think it's consistent with the design guidelines as I read them. And, you know, I think most importantly, the homeowner likes it. And you know, I have a bias against central planning, I think, in my heart. And I think our primary role is to avoid and help avoid the big mistakes. And I don't think this is one of them. And so I would be inclined to support the petition. And the taste of the homeowner and the architect, I think they worked hard on the petition. And, you know, if it came in front of me with 3 dormers and some narrower dormers or whatever, I would have probably approved that one too. But that's just my perspective.
So let me ask the architect if you can answer this question. How are you open-minded to further study of the dormers, or is this pretty much what we should be expecting?
Sure. Well, for sure, it's an easy, I can easily wrap my mind around scaling them down a bit.
Yeah.
So that would bring the ridge line down and the width of them down. Part of what drove the width also was in looking at the other existing dormers and just sort of maintaining overall proportions. Now, of course, this is 3 windows, and we're down to 2 casements here. But as you walked around the house, we were just keeping that all in our minds as we were making these decisions.
Sure.
We did look at one large dormer, but then that became really problematic relative to, meaning like if these 2 center ones came together.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm never a big fan of 2 gables or creating a valley that will just collect with snow, and
Yeah.
that always becomes a problematic detail. So then, do we put one large roof over it? Does it become a shed roof? No, because we don't have any shed roof dormers on this house. And we wanted to maintain the same pitch. The roof, you know, we didn't want to all of a sudden show up with a hip roof that could have the same pitch going back on the hip, but then the side gable was, you know, really flattened out to cover the width of a sort of a double wide dormer there. So it really did circle us back to looking at individual dormers. We did, there was one scheme early on that the homeowner just couldn't wrap their mind around or accept, where we had a traditional oxbow style dormer that was sort of a softer style, in their homes in the immediate area that have those. And that would certainly give us a single dormer that had width that sort of played into the ridge line a little bit better, but we abandoned that fairly early on.
Sure. Could be interesting, but it is
Yeah.
their house.
Yeah, right. And it, again, I will be the first to acknowledge this distance here between where this eave and the gutter are and where the inset for the dormer starts. Yes, that's still a very large distance, and there's, you know, short of, like, and the homeowner wasn't considering this at all, chopping that off and rebuilding that whole part of the garage was not then the whole scope and the cost of the job.
I have to say, I mean, since I, asked you the question, but we are deliberating, I mean, I think you're on the right track. I actually like that, you've kind of thrown the symmetry away a little bit. There's some symmetry here, but you've broken it up a little bit. It reacts to the roof spaces, I think, pretty well. I think that, to my eye, the dormer over the entrance driveway feels a little bit heavy, because it's just over the top of that. But I think if you narrowed them all up, I suspect that would improve it. That's what I think, frankly. I think it would lower the roof line, and it would just, they would just be just ever so subtly smaller on the roof without losing them at all. So, and then with respect to the other improvements, I'm not so bound by the classical rules of architecture on the columns. I did read the comments about that, and this is an ongoing debate. If you drive around town, you'll see the column located inboard or outboard of the roof line all over town. And where I kind of fall out on it personally is that when the structure above those columns is light, it seems like they want to be classically, located. Right. And when it's quite weighty, like as it is in this case, and as it is across the street, and as it is at the Walgreens entrance, somehow the massiveness of those entrances seem like the column wants to be under them firmly. And also, you're kind of constrained by the porch itself, right? Because you've got to put that column on the existing porch, I think. Are you rebuilding that porch, that stoop?
That is correct. We're not rebuilding the stoop and the
Yeah, so the base of that requires, if you look at the bottom of well, it's hard to point out, but you've got some constraints with respect to how far out you can push those columns. So frankly, I'm willing to use, to cede to your judgment on those. I think it's a great improvement on this side of the house for sure, this part of it, so.
I mean, another thing that plays into why we wouldn't come out further is, and it's not properly shown here, but if you could picture the two-stall garage is right here. So backing out of this stall, it's very close as you're trying to get your vehicle in and out.
You're making an argument against the columns. I'm just kidding.
I'm trying to defend why we wouldn't extend
I understand.
stoop further out to pull the columns further out.
I know I'm committing heresy by giving you latitude on classical column placement, but I do think that there's room for some debate on that. What do you think, folks? If we were to give some direction on making these dormers a little more narrow, so by bringing down the roof line, do you think that we could give the staff some latitude to approve that and work with the petitioner and staff? Are you comfortable in that capacity? Yes. Okay. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's an easy fix.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds
Any other comments before I ask for a motion? Then I'll ask for a motion. Good luck with that one. Who's going to try that? John.
I'm going to try it live. I move that the commission approve a certificate of appropriateness for the design of an addition and facade alterations for 780 Barbary Lane, based on the findings as stated on pages 1 through 3 of the applicable report by city staff dated June 26, 2013, subject to the conditions stated in numbered paragraphs 1 and 2 on page 3 of the applicable staff report, and with the commission recommendation that owner consider.
I think we want to make that a condition.
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay. So to go back, the conditions will be as stated in numbered paragraphs 1 and 2 on page 3 of the applicable staff report, with the further condition that the owner
Work with staff.
Based on commission's comments.
To narrow the dormers.
To narrow the dormers.
To lower the roof line.
And so as to lower the roof line of the dormers.
There you go.
That's an excellent motion.
I'll second that.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Travers and seconded by Commissioner Ransom. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, congratulations. You've just seen a iterative process evolve.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Jim, appreciate you pushing us along. All right, congratulations on that one. All right. And I think our next request is for Consideration of a request for certificate of appropriateness approving an addition to the residence of 885 Maplewood Road. And I'll ask if any commissioners have any conflict on this one. And I see none, so come on up and, oh, there he is. Tell us what you got.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bob Ruggles, architect, representing 885 and Troy and Michelle Eilenfeld's house. I've worked on this house, been fortunate enough to work on this house over, it's almost 10 years now. And back in 2002, 2003, different owners asked me to look at several renovations. We did a lot of work to the inside of the house and looked to add a garage. The existing garage was too small to house modern vehicles. It was built in 1928, so a common problem. We asked to attach a garage on the east side with a 0 lot line setback, and after 3 presentations to the Historic Preservation, maybe you remember, Susie, I don't know if you were on then or not, but we were supported by the Historic Preservation Commission and the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation for a 0 lot line connection, which was seemed to be architecturally most sympathetic to the house and the best place to connect it. We went on to the Zoning Board of Appeals and was promptly denied because it was the most egregious variation you could get. We negotiated and came back with a detached garage on the west side, which is built today, but it still had a substantial variation. The problem that was not solved when we did that was a connection between house and garage. And while this is a summertime view, and the same view that Stanley Anderson used in his own portfolio, by the way, this is what it looks like from the front step to the detached garage in the wintertime. There's about 2 feet of grade change. These are granite cobbles. It is shoveled by hand so that it is not damaged by a vehicle push plow. And you can see that you just can't get all the snow and ice up off of there. And then it gets hit by the sun and the snow melts and ices. It just becomes a very challenging traverse. So what we're looking for is a safe means to connect between the house and the garage. I don't think I need to say any more about that. The picture says it all. This is a close-in view of the curving wall that was built in 2004 and the recreation of the column that was in the original drawings between the garage, the original garage in 1928. So we used elements from the original architecture and put it back together. The proposed addition is behind the arching wood wall and behind that short brick wall. The green area shows the buildable lot. The purple area shows the proposed footprint of the new passage. On Tuesday night, we presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals, so our lesson learned in 2002 was maybe ask for the footprint first and then go for historic preservation. So we did, and we were supported unanimously. And the Hawks won. So, and this is our footprint, the proposed footprint, and you can see it highlighted in yellow is what we intend to connect. So there'll be a new doorway outside the foyer, which is currently a coat room. The roof above that coat room needs work. The lintel has been water damaged. It's sloping. The masonry is deteriorated. So we need to take that whole section apart anyways. So we're actually helping to solve other problems while doing this. A model that shows, hold on, let me grab a pointer. a 3D model that shows where we're gonna add on. So if you just kind of focus on this area, you all might have your own monitors, but you'll see that change. I can flip back and forth. The proposed roof is in plane with the little attached shed that's on the garage that was added in 2004. That shed, its pitch, and the trellis that sit behind it are all aesthetically, or elements, born of architectural elements from the original structure. There is an original screen porch on the southwest corner of the house, and we have duplicated those posts and beams exactly as they were built on the original. So we've taken the kit of parts of architecture and reapplied them in the most softest way you could possibly touch the house. This is a back view, and again, you will see the addition in this area. So you can see it's just the rhythm of posts and beams that continue itself into the house. I'll go back and forth a couple of times so you can see before and after. These are proposed and existing elevations. The purple element shows the area that encroaches into the variation. We're done with that variation process. Well, except for City Council, but it identifies the differences on one page. This is a dissolving image that shows the existing wall, the existing stone cap, and then the white area in here is actually going to be taken down in order that the wall cap matches the sill and allows more light and transparency. So while we are providing a roof structure on it, I'm dropping the stone line downward to match the sill of the windows before, so that there's more transparency from the dining room than there is even today. And we're using those same columns, as I said, that are on the back of the house. And it will be glazed, it will be enclosed, it will be unheated. All right, so I am adding a little bit of brick on top of the archway here, and this line will continue in order to hide the construction, the back portion of this roof. And I need that height in order to get the proper roof coverage over the top of the dining room window. So the trick here is balancing something that sits 20 feet away and connecting it back to the roof line of the house. And after many, many, many measurements and careful study, we found it. This is an elevation of the existing south view, and I'm going to walk you through the south view existing, a south section, and then the south elevation. So that's the elevation. Here's the section that shows you how the roof connects the stairs up, and how I have to squeeze that roof underneath there to get it all to fit in order to be underneath the window and no higher than that curving wall element. Does that make sense? And then this is the south elevation that shows sliding doors. And these will be very minimal, very minimal frames. The idea is to touch the house as lightly as possible, be as low as possible, and to be as transparent as possible while providing the functionality of a passage. This is the back elevation as it is today that shows the arbor, the shed, the garage, and the back of the house. So if you use your imagination, you can see that this row of columns simply repeats itself back into the house. I would like to quickly address a few points in terms of the floor area, the bulk overage. And I'm just going to bullet point these because a lot of it is covered, and I'm not going to repeat all the standards that are written. The mitigating circumstances as I see them is, number one, that 50% of it is a lot with a ravine on it, so 50% of that ravine is not eligible for consideration in the bulk of the house. Number two is that we do have design element overages that exist within the house even before we do work to it. Number three, the garage is over 138 square feet, which you may say, well, that was introduced in 2004, but it's only a 600 square foot garage allowance, small for this type property. Number 4 is that the high roof lines and peaks you can see on the right-hand side of there is that there is third floor coverage where there are third floor area calculations that apply to the house where there is no third floor. Number 5, I call it uniqueness of plan, in that in some instances the original house is single loaded corridor wrapped around the courtyard, the turret, the dovecote, the covered walkway, elements that we've inherited within the original design of the house add to the architectural character to the house, but they add bulk too. So we've inherited some of these things. At the end of the day, we're 542 square feet over. We're currently today 240 square feet over. So we're asking 300 feet and 11.3. And looking over my notes, I found it sort of interesting that in 2004, we asked and received for a 12% variation. And the rules change. I mean, the way the methodology of calculating bulk changed, but it's just either it's trivia or it's important. I can't figure out, but we got 12% once before. Now we're asking for 11.3. That's all I got.
All right, thank you. Nice timing, too. And do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Chairman Pairitz. This property is certainly distinct. It sits on the corner of Maplewood and Maple Court. It has continuous brick wall that surrounds the property and defines the streetscape for this lot. The home on the property is a contributing structure within the district. It was built in 1928. And as the petitioner noted, there have been previous discussions by the Historic Preservation Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals with respect to additions, particularly a garage on the property. Back in 2002, there were lengthy discussions about where to place the detached garage, or the garage space. There was an existing garage that was converted into living space. Several discussions about where it should be placed, the impact of the zoning variance, the impact of the building scale variance. Ultimately, the Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals granted approval for the detached structure as it exists today. So the structure that's built on the property right now is consistent with those approvals. The project before the Commission today is to provide a light connection between the detached garage and the main structure along the same footprint almost of the curving brick wall that currently connects the two structures. So visually there's a connection now. This is allowing for some protected walking space between the two structures. As was noted, there is a building scale variance that's requested of 11.3%. Since this project went to the Commission previously, our building scale ordinance has been amended, and under the current calculation, the 11.3% is an accurate calculation. The Zoning Board of Appeals granted or recommended approval for the zoning variance for the small section of the addition that actually attaches the breezeway to the garage. So there are a lot of pieces to this. The Commission is asked to review the architectural design of the breezeway. It's a simple addition, wood timbers with glass infill on a flat roof, as well as the building scale variance. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have, but we are recommending approval based on the standards in the staff report.
All right, thanks, Megan. So now's an opportunity for commissioners to ask questions, and I might jump in and ask the first one if you would humor me. Have I been doing that all night? Thanks. Humor me every time, right? So we did get a letter from the Historic Preservation Commission Foundation. They were pointing out in their letter that one of the original justifications for the grant of the original overage was the separation of the garage from the house. And without going into it verbatim, because I think that we're going to get a report on that later. My question has to do with the design of the windows between these two. So as you were pointing out in your presentation, Bob, you've got a wall that connects the house now that was, maybe you could go back to that drawing that let's go back to, that's the one. That's the one. So actually, your original design that was approved had a wall that was, about a foot higher than this, something like that.
Right. This
There you
one.
go. And now you're lowering that, but you are introducing a roof element. And my question is with respect to the windows, did you propose the simple glass, pane of glass there to reinforce the notion of openness, or because of this previous kind of precedent that we were trying to keep this open, or do you think that that's the best solution architecturally in this particular instance? Because I could see that same thing working with, glass lights that were more sympathetic to the original house design as well. And so that's my question is which would you prefer? Forget about the bulk for a minute.
We had considered all sorts of options, from a very modern approach where it's almost completely a glass box without posts and beams, to introduce a very modern dialogue. And we considered fenestration in the glass as well, and it seemed to be busy and close to the front of the house. So we landed on the use of the post and beams and clear glass without fenestration in order to de-emphasize it because of proximity to the front of the house.
And one other question, what about just leaving it as an open connection without glass, but a covered walkway?
We were concerned about blowing, drifting snow, and
Between the two buildings?
wouldn't solve the issue, and that if you did build it and you didn't solve the problem, that we'd be back asking for enclosure of it.
That's where we got here today, actually. All right, other questions from commissioners?
Well, Megan, kind of going off that idea of having more of a pergola look without the glass, when you enclose it, that adds to the bulk, right? If it was open, would that add to the bulk? Meaning if there was no glass there?
In this particular case, because of the different design elements that are currently existing on the house, either option would result in the same bulk overage.
So I got to tell you, as I drive by the house, it's interesting. The bulk ordinance is always a dicey kind of thing because it's written in a kind of a generalist view to try to grade all things evenly. And so, because this house was built as a courtyard house, the most imposing thing about this house on the rest of the neighborhood is the walls themselves, actually, because they're right up to the property line. They enclose this house, and I read the house. It doesn't. Again, just knee-jerk reaction to the, being on the site. When you see the house, you wouldn't think the house is overly large for the neighborhood, I don't think. But the walls actually impose themselves, pretty dramatically on the sidewalk and on the streets as you walk by and drive by. But that's part of the, original architecture of the house. For me, the connection, whether it's the fence or whether it's a breezeway or whether it's kind of happens. I'm not sure the original logic of providing a separation between the two structures so that light could exist between them really holds up very much. The fence is 5 feet high anyway, and so it doesn't really read that way to me anyway. And frankly, it looks to me like the solution would be fine from a bulk standpoint. So I get to the architecture, what's appropriate for the house. Now, I know I'm not asking a question, but I would encourage you to ask questions about that if you would, because I think the bulk is one thing. I think you have to consider the bulk one way, but you also have to consider the architecture too, so it's both.
Well, let me ask you an architecture question. The columns that you're proposing are duplicates of those columns that are in the back attached to the garage, is that correct?
They're both attached to the garage and attached.
Well, in the backyard, there's those columns over, you know, the open air attachment to the garage.
Originally at the southwest corner of the house, in the screen porch, is where the columns originally existed. We duplicated them for the trellis to soften the back of the detached garage onto the
But
garden.
the ones that are currently on the trellis are the same detail you're proposing for the breezeway?
Correct.
Okay. And you're gonna then attach windows to those? How is that gonna work?
The windows would just be inboard of those wooden columns.
Okay.
We're not
And
gonna
this,
sliver the glass in between. It'll be like a curtain wall that just passes on the inside. The posts and beams will be outboard, so it'll be simple framing from the inside.
okay, and the columns are gonna be attached to the wall or go into the ground next to the wall or anchored next to the brick wall?
You're talking about the columns closest to the house, right?
I'm talking about the columns that are next to the wall that attaches the detached garage to the house.
So from the driveway, you're gonna be looking at columns that are on top of the brick wall or
On top.
sitting on top?
It's got a foundation wall underneath it. You know, we built it so it wouldn't differentially settle, and it would sit on top of the wall.
And the
But
caps,
To
I'm-
pass those, you know, we'd considered, it's a good question. I mean, how do you detail that?
yeah,
Because, you know, do you set that in there and then get a 6-inch, you know, brick wall, 6-inch space and then glass? It'd be very difficult to, you know, maintain that 6-inch space in between. You'd still have to put a cap or something between, you know, in the thickness of the post is what we're talking about. You understand?
no.
The
could
decision was
You have to talk a little slower for me.
Okay.
Could you explain that to me again?
Well, the two choices that were considered was,
Uh-huh.
do the post sit on top of that curving wall
Right.
that has a foundation, or do you take that post and you run it fully down to the ground and run it on either side of the wall? We always think on the house side of the wall. There'd be no reason to put it outboard.
Right.
So if we did put it inboard, you know, those columns are roughly 6 inches by 6 inches. That has a space. They take up a space, and there's a space in between that one and the next one. To glaze in between there and to try to press that glazing up against the brick would be very challenging.
Yeah.
And what I have designed is something that's far more simple. It sets the post on top of the wall and allows the glass to come right behind it. So we can set a caulk bead right along the back of that wall. We'll not have a space in between the back of the wall and the glass.
Okay.
It's
And
something I feel will stand the test of time. It'll work well, and I think it'll complement the way the building's built.
And the capstone on the wall is gonna be removed and a new capstone is gonna be set there?
Correct.
Okay, and I noticed there's a lot of deterioration of brick right underneath the capstone as it exists now.
Yet again, an opportunity to
That-
reflash and, you know, get a roof over it and protect it from the water.
Okay. The choice of these columns as that is just to pick up the columns that are on the trellis that are not seen from except for in the backyard. Is that the reason those columns were chosen?
Yeah, absolutely. There's
Is
not, you know,
Is there any place else that detail is picked up in the house or the property?
It is in some of the half timbering of the covered walkway, east side of the courtyard. Because that
Could you
that
find out where that
courtyard.
would be?
Sure.
Just get your,
There, I'm gonna spin you around here.
thanks.
It's kind of, I don't, you know, we didn't model every little
No,
component of it, but
you
in
know,
front of the turret on the east side of the open courtyard,
Okay.
right here. Okay, so this was originally open in 1928. I don't know when Stanley Anderson enclosed it. We found the drawings. Paul Bergman helped us find the drawings, but it was enclosed. There were some modifications to this wall in and around here. I mean, there was speculation that the original garage was planned over on this lot. We never found those drawings, okay? So, you know, what this actually does is connect the kitchen door to this lot line. I think Troy will tell you a story about having to walk his dog through the courtyard out here to get to the to the backyard. So there's definitely some compromises in living with this house, but the detail you're talking about exists right in half timbered in there as well as the southwest courtyard. As a freestanding sort of open post and beam structure,
Yeah.
it exists only on the southwest corner of the house, the screen porch, right here. I should have put the columns in the model, but I didn't.
Okay. Was that detail, was that original to the house, do you know?
It was original to the
okay.
house. That was 1928. That's in the original drawings.
Now, the roof, is there any pitch to it at all, or is it,
Yes.
what is
it's-
the pitch?
It's about, well, it's about 1.5 and 12
And which, it pitches to the
to the courtyard.
courtyard?
I have a question for you.
Because that's the nature of the drainage of the house. We're going to cut a swale into the yard there, and we're going to carry the water down. Get you to the picture. There's currently, you know, some water ponding right back into here.
Yeah.
So we're going to cut a swale back down here. It's low. There's no problem once we get back here.
Well, it's
It's
pretty
just-
dry out there today, you know, after all
I'm
the
sure.
rain, so.
Right. I bet it was a little squishy back by that. Anyways, back behind here, we've got some water problems.
Okay.
I have a question that goes back to something that Kurt said. In any iterations of your design, did you find yourself taking away or removing architectural details or any structures in the breezeway to comply with the bulk? And would you view this as the best architectural solution to the problem?
I do. It took a lot of it. You know, I think the best designs actually look pretty simple at the end of the day. They look like they're natural, and they look like you came upon them rather easily, but I guarantee you it was not. It was a challenge to try to, you know, measure these up, and I went back, I measured it, went back, measured again. The lines weren't, you know, matching up, go back again. And, you know, it's really trying to make the head height of the dining room window and clear the head height of the doorway coming out while stepping down and clearing the structure of it was a bit of work. And no architectural elements are removed for bulk. We only remove that one cap and press it downward in order that, you know, it aligns with the dining room window. And I just think that's the right thing to do to make it as transparent. If it's left up high, the proportions to the street of the glass area and the columns get sort of horizontal. And by dropping that down, not only does it align with the sill, it does allow more transparency and more view, but it also allows for a better proportion of the column to the opening. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Bob, could you give just some background on, if you go to your model image that shows the face of the garage, keep going, that's, I guess that, that's probably it. Yeah, that's actually a better one. So the genesis of the curved wall and the connection to the new garage, including the reuse of that existing column or that column that was introduced that was an artifact from the original structure somehow, was that geometry of that curved wall something that existed, or was that, how did that get introduced to this design?
It was part of my design for the garage in order to have a more whimsical garden connection, to treat it as a connected yet separate structure. And it It is probably one of the most modern elements that we introduced. If you're kind of getting the opinion that I enjoy the play between modernism and historic material, and what's original and what's not, and how you can distinguish the two, I very much do. And I think here, this is just a play on the idea of the garden wall floating around the property. It lightly touches the house. It's separate but connected. And, to introduce a doorway that you have to walk through makes that low garden wall seem much more substantial. And then to actually bend and, curve this cast-in-place lintel over the top of an element that was designed 80 years ago by Stanley Anderson and then hand-cut by an Albanian stone carver on the south side of Chicago is all a great story. So I just think it adds and adds and adds to the house.
So I think the reason I asked the question is there's this column, and then we're taking the other columns that seem quite appropriate on the back side of the garage for a lighter structure, the trellis structure. And I think we're trying to resolve in our own minds up here, whether this breezeway is going to read as a really light structure that's appropriately to be held up with these rustic wooden columns that mimic the columns that are on the other pergola kind of constructions, or whether it wants to read as a more solid. Might getting the gist of it. So I just don't know the answer. Just asking.
Well, I get what you're asking, Kurt, and the question really can be boiled down to: is the heavy timber post and beam material and structure the right one to put on the wall as it touches the house, right? That's kind of the
and so
question.
go back to that.
But can I point out
sure,
one? I'm
sure,
Kurt,
go ahead.
but this is something we introduced almost as a folly, as an architectural remnant. We never found that. We found the drawings.
I see.
We never found a picture that showed that even Anderson's portfolio doesn't pan far enough to the left. Believe me, I've looked to try to find that column. I've looked at all these things. But we never found it. Paul turned this up, and we thought, isn't that cool? That was supposed to be in between the garage doors. And it was great that, we had somebody that was willing to, pay for that to be recreated. Now, the only thing I would say is that this should be left alone. It should be unique. It should not ever be reproduced on the property again, is my feeling. And that the association between the proposed beams would associate well with the half timbering and the gable ends. So, sorry, Mr. Ransom, you asked about, is this the only place the columns are used? I guess I would take that a little further. Is it only the place that material is used?
Right.
So,
I was talking about the wooden, columns that you're proposing here. I was wondering if that was picking up. I'm sorry. I didn't interrupt.
Ask away.
I'm just, is this the only? I know this is your best solution. I appreciate that you go through that. But did you have other solutions, or did you think about? What I'm kind of struggling with is whether this is really a breezeway, whether it's really, being separate from the house. I'm wondering if, being all in and, making it more substantial, if there was any thought given to that.
there was, actually.
And I don't want to, I don't want to go completely off kilter here, but
No,
I just.
that's fine. It's a good
because
question. I'm just trying to
not
get
sure
back
this is
far
really
enough.
a breezeway or.
Well,
where when I was approached to work on the project, I'm going to share a little story, Troy. But he's smiling. But he asked me to look at the symmetry of this elevation, how it pans over to the left, and could you add on over in a much more substantial way to the right? My gut feeling then was there's picturesque architecture and there's classically organized architecture. Picturesque architecture deals with localized symmetries and overall asymmetrical composition. To add symmetry in a much more robust way around that entryway, to me, dilutes the composition. So to me, this is like branches of a tree where they don't grow off in a symmetrical way. They grow off very organically, and that's what this composition is. That's the shortest way I
Well,
can say that.
I think your gut was probably good in that respect. Because I don't think you want to increase further the impact of more construction on this little gap, if you will. You know, the resolution here is a little dicey because you've got this, the structure that you added, which the rounded top gate and the whimsical column, which is, I think is all kind of working fine in the existing house. And then when you fill in this, the top of this breezeway, the wall doesn't really want to go very far down because it's a pretty heavy element to the right with this round gate, right? And so, so you don't really want to drop that wall away. It feels, yeah, there you go. Well, maybe you could, but it's at least something that I wonder about. See, it works there for me. Here, when I look at this, I look at those columns, and for some reason, probably the same reason Bill's asking all your questions, it feels like those columns want to be longer. Like if you just covered up the right side, the columns, would you say, well, drop the wall a little bit further
Well,
too?
yeah, I mean.
Because you're creating these kind of blocky window shapes that, you know.
And you don't, you know, and, you know, it becomes more of a breezeway, and you don't break up the fenestration that
Yes.
Anderson had on this side as much as you do.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it's a
with
dicey.
this solution.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I'll tell you what, let's see if there's any other questions, and then we'll get our public comment. and
Well, you know,
then-
I think I'm really struggling with this one too, because in the back, it does seem to work better with the timbers.
Yeah,
With that continuation. And in front, something is just not working here
Yeah.
for me. And I'm wondering would you consider, I mean, I understand your dilemmas here,
Sure.
the hardship, but I think maybe it's the glass that's throwing me. Because it just seems like such a contemporary feature. You've worked so hard to make this nice garden wall, and it's contemporary, but not really. It's pretty traditional, and it really is a nice added feature you added there. I'm afraid when you add the glass, it's going to kind of detract from all these features you worked so hard to provide, because your eye is going to be drawn just to that glass. So just wondering if you would consider leaving it open without the glass. I mean, I know maybe you could put some heaters on the floor to melt the snow or whatever, but I'm afraid you're going to really be detracting.
I'm not sure it's the only thing that bothers me, frankly.
Well, for
Yeah,
me,
I-
I'm
yeah.
just thinking that when I look at this, I think maybe
Yeah.
that's the trouble I'm having, is maybe the glass. I'm
Yeah.
not too sure. But just wondering if you would consider taking out that glass.
Would talk it over. Yeah, I'm sure we would give consideration to any comments given.
Other questions for
I had a
either?
bulk question. I know we're not supposed to.
No,
ask bulk
ask,
questions,
I didn't mean to turn you off to that. Ask away.
But the architect made a comment that I didn't understand, and it related to how what I believe is a preservation easement played into the calculation of bulk overage. Could you explain that, or did I just not understand what you were saying at all?
Yeah, I didn't say preservation easement.
Conservation easement.
Conservation easement. The open space easement does not impact the ravine footprint, 50% of that ravine area. So there's tableland and ravine area is the way it goes. Let me get to a site plan and I can describe it more accurately.
Well, you did not say that the conservation easement impacted the.
Yeah, it's the table. So this dotted line is determined by a surveyor using surveyor's instruments to determine at what point does the tableland break into the ravine. And then, as you can see these gradients, that steep grade that is the ravine. So if we drew a polygon over this area, and I shaded that all in, only 50% of that area could be used for the building, towards the building's building area, building scale calculation. 50% of it can't be used, 50% of it can be used. I simply pointed out as a mitigating circumstance towards the request for bulk variation.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one question, would you describe the material or the framing of those windows that you're proposing?
Sure. They will most likely be a aluminum frame window, and we will camouflage the aluminum frames back behind the timbers, so they'll be pinned back and secured. The timbers, I actually think, will not be heavy timbers. They will be made to look like heavy timbers, so we're going to wrap them with the cedar, and then I'll use a paralam core to the inside of it, so we have stability. But, you know, the biggest concern there, Bob, is that differential settlement of the structure, and big, heavy timber wood like that, you know, will move over time. So I need a stable substrate. So it's going to be a little architectural trickery to make it look old and yet build it with the strength of new.
Any other questions? Now's an opportunity for the public, so come on up, and I know we have a presentation, so introduce yourself for the audience.
My name's Alice Moulton Ely, and I live at 420 East Woodland Road in Lake Forest, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation. The board put together the following statement. An open lands easement is located to the west of the garage. In fact, the open lands modified the original easement boundaries to make room for the placement of the garage in 2002. The bulk overage and the visual appearance of bulk was a concern in 2002 and is a larger concern now given the proposed addition. The addition of the breezeway will also change the relationship between the non-historic garage and the historic house. Regarding the bulk issue, although there is a large amount of preserved open space to the west of the garage, it is largely hidden from the street behind the solid brick wall, so it really doesn't serve to mitigate the appearance of mass caused by the existing bulk overage or the proposed additional bulk overage. Because of this issue, when the garage was originally designed with input from the HPC and city staff, it was placed to give some visual separation from the house so that the view of the open space beyond could help mitigate the appearance of bulk. Filling in that space with an addition, which will be visible from the street, will make the garage much more of an extension of the north elevation of the house and will change the relationship of the garage to the house and open space as viewed looking into the courtyard. The bulk overage was a challenge with this property in 2002 when the garage was added. The primary justification for granting the bulk overage at that time was the separation between the house and the detached garage. This petition seeks to negate one of the main justifications for originally granting the overage. Then it's also suggested a snow melt system installed under the pavers could solve the problem presented in the petitioner's statement of intent without making any visual changes to the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public testimony? And I see none, so we can deliberate.
You know, I guess maybe we could talk about the bulk and the architecture. I think he's framed it nicely when we first started. And I mean, to me, although the Blackhawks, I think they played Monday, right? Did they play Monday?
Yep.
Not Tuesday. I think the bulk was discussed in a different body and it was approved, right? So.
The meeting was Monday too.
Yeah. So I think on the bulk issue, it seemed like we're a recommending body for that.
No,
Right.
is that right? Recommending body.
Yeah,
For the
right.
city council. But the action that
But just
occurred
in
on
general,
Monday
right?
was not bulk, it was was that building review board for variance or for bulk?
The zoning board on Monday reviewed the setback variance because
you.
a portion of the addition encroaches into the corner side yard along Maplewood.
So not part of the bulk,
Okay,
just the
but not-
variance.
The
The
Historic
structure.
Preservation Commission is a recommending body for the building scale variance that's requested.
Okay, so we're as responsible for the bulk.
Yeah.
and the design in this case.
Which are related.
Yeah, right.
Should I give my considerations?
Sure.
For what they're worth.
That's what we're here for.
Certainly on looking at the site, bulk, the residents didn't present as over bulk in any way to me. Not that, so that doesn't seem to be an area of concern to me. And in terms of the design of this connection between the house and the garage, the first thought that came to me is putting myself in the shoes of someone living in this house. A connection appears to be absolutely necessary functionally for enjoyment of the residents and the way we like to enjoy our houses nowadays. And then I thought that the use of the wood pillars made sense in terms of the half timbering that presents on the house, both from where you would look at the wall and in the courtyard. And then I had an opportunity to be in the house, and there are wonderful elements within the house also involving this sort of timbering. And so that's my thought on this.
Well, I don't have a problem with the bulk, building scale variance. You know, I think this proposal, you know, with them actually lowering the wall may, you know, mitigate some of the, you know, the, if not in reality, at least in visually, you know, any impact of the bulk. My problem here is that, you know, this was put in what I would, this garage was added in what I would consider recent time, and it was added as a detached element for a reason. You know, I think, you know, I think there's an and I think what you're proposing is, you know, kind of undoing that which was originally done, and I have some problem with that. Well, I have a lot of problem with that. Additionally, the breezeway, which, you know, I don't consider a breezeway since it's enclosed, the breezeway that you're proposing kind of sticks a new architectural element in between the garage and the original structure. I understand the reason that you're using the timbering, and, you know, you're trying to, and, you know, you gave me a great explanation of how it's being picked up from other areas, but you don't recognize that that cohesion where you're proposing to place it. You know, I think there's a way to do this to you know, keep it so that the garage feels detached, but I don't think this is it. And it also bothers me that, you know, when you're coming onto this property, this is really, you know, what you're going to be driving at and the first thing you see, rather than, you know, the main facade of the house when you come into this motor into the driveway and the motorway. So that's kind of the way I feel about it.
Yeah, so I live in a house with a detached garage, and I know the pains of that. At the same time, I bought it when it was detached. I'm sympathetic to the argument that the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation made in respect to the justification of the original structure of the detached garage and the spacing that provided. And it's really kind of a judgment call. It is fairly recent, so I hear a lot about what you're saying, and it's really a tough call for me. I mean, it really is. I can see the hardship, and I think it's artistically nice, and it's a nice architecture, an attempt to, you know, to try to minimize it, but be in keeping with the house. But it's either in or out, right? I mean, there's no halfway here. You're either going to have a structure that encloses the pathway to the garage, or you're not, and it's going to be added to the bulk. You know, I think for me, I wouldn't mind seeing an alternative or two, because this is a Stanley Anderson. This is a, you know, this is a amazing house, and it is something that, you know, if the garage took 3 times to get through, you know, part of me feels like twice wouldn't be terrible. And because there is some reservations, I think it's incumbent upon us to give really specific feedback and direction on how to improve it, or to say, you know what, I'm against any change to this because of the arguments that were articulated in the foundation's write-up, that it's over bulk, this is what it is, there's spacing here to justify the detached garage, and that's it. You know, and if that's how we stand, then I think we should agree to that position, and then they won't waste their time and money, at least as long as we're on the board to do it. Or if we think there's a middle ground somewhere, to then we could talk about that.
Well, let me ask you about that, and I'd like Bob's opinion of this too, because their solution, you know, we're not supposed to be designing up here, we're just reacting to stuff. But unfortunately, we're not reacting all that positively necessarily to the design, and I think it's a challenging little knot. And not to say that what you've proposed isn't sensitive to it. I know that, you know, you've digested the problem and come up with a solution. I think there might be at least one other one to talk about that I'd like your input on, really the commissioners as well. And Bob, maybe you could load back that slide that shows the view from the driveway in the proposed configuration. Oh, actually, let's stop there for a minute. Go back to that last one for a minute. So here, no, I'm sorry, one more. There we go. So here what we're doing, or what you're proposing is you're filling in all the way, you know, from the, what is that? It's a dining room, or the vestibule all the way to the garage, but you fill all the way out to the wall. And so what that does is that requires the window line to go on top of that garden wall and the roof line to come all the way out to the top of the garden wall too. But if you were to just extend straight from that door to the existing trellis, you might be able to achieve a connection that felt much more like a breezeway. That could be, you know, wood structure that would be behind the wall. And I just wondered if you'd given that any thought. I know that it's not exactly what you're proposing, but it would. Now if you go to that elevation of the proposed view from the driveway, you can just, even that one's pretty good actually, if you stop at that, go to the last one. So you can see how this changes. There is a kind of a mass that's imposed. There's a difference there because that wall, you know, is kind of a, even though it's a little bit of a higher wall, and maybe you could just hide this whole connection behind that wall and let it just not be right on top of the driveways. And did you give that any thought? Does that make any sense? Is that something that it would be worth a evaluation anyway? And you know, what I'm thinking here is, you know, I'm sensitive to Jim's kind of, you know, hey, tell them take it or leave it so they don't waste their time. But at the same time, you know, it sounds like under the right design, we probably could get over the bulk issues. Mm-hmm. But what we're concerned with is the resolution of the architecture, because we have a historic home here and we've got a, you know, we have a solution on the garage that was not a specific historic response to it. It didn't take, you know, the exact architecture of the building and just kind of repeated it. You know, it took some suggestions and there's a little bit of folly involved. So because of that, it's just now we have one more element that's tricky to balance. So, you know, we're looking for, you know, ideas on how to accomplish what you want to do here, how to make the homeowner happy. And, you know, obviously, you know, nobody likes to walk outside in the cold before they get in their garage or whatever. I'm like you, only I built the house. What do you think?
To respond?
Sure,
So,
please.
Well, you know, there's sort of 3 issues that I'm thinking about right now. Is one, you know, it is an issue of, you know, will it be allowed to be connected or not? And if yes, it's allowed to be connected, but in a different configuration, then certainly my clients would like me to proceed and, you know, to figure out what that answer is that's most acceptable to the city. Would like to emphasize that it was a request of the homeowners back in 2002 that the garage be attached to the house. And that when it was detached from the house, it was have a functional garage or not. I mean, they compromised at not having a connection to the garage. And they felt, I remember because I heard all about it, they were not satisfied that it was detached, but happy enough to get their vehicles enclosed. So it was a great compromise at that point, and there was no happiness on their part to not have it connected. Now come 2012, December 2012, we have new owners, and we have the same issue coming again. So deny it again, different homeowners, guess what's going to happen, all right? It's a problem with the house. You should allow the house to be modified in a way that's commensurate with other houses of this type, have the other functionality, and encourage them to continue to preserve the house and take care of it. They're doing an excellent job. It's a beautiful house, and they're doing more and more and more, and they're picking up exactly where the last homeowners left off. And this is a key component, and believe me, you know, we've gone through a lot for this tiny little addition onto this, and they wouldn't do it if they didn't think it was really important. So, you know, that's why I'm here standing behind it, endorsing it. I wouldn't if I didn't think it were appropriate for the architecture. Now, to your point, Kurt, is that to narrow this down, I mean, we still need to get into the house. To provide the connection to a house with no doorway, you know, is pointless. So, you know, this is only about, you know, maybe 34 inches. It is really an aesthetic element. It's not a real passage here. So to provide, you know, a walkway that's wide enough. Okay, so I think the bottom line is yes, there's probably some answer in there. Where I get hung up on it, Kurt, is that, you know, it necks down. We've got to get passage to a door, and then you end up with a point to where there's some kind of enclosure pressed up right behind that brick wall. Where I thought you were going down, what seemed to be a reasonable alternative to me was a different articulation of those columns on the wall, or a different address to that wall, the balance of that wall and its wall height and the columns. Maybe it is half timbered, like it is on the front porch where we cut it all the way down, and the timbers looked infilled with the brick in between it, so that the columns can actually be seen in full. Maybe it's take down the brick wall entirely and use the brick or the heavy timber with some sort of wainscot along the bottom. And, you know, just the idea to bring it fully down with glass. I suppose that's one too.
Or you possibly move the wall out a little bit? You know,
This wall outward this way?
Just a little bit.
I would certainly consider that.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that, you know, that's the solution, but that's another possibility of, you know.
I would consider that. I've kind of balked at that. But if we're going round and round and somebody wants to sit down on a table and, what do you call it when you get together? And
Well, you know, I think the problem here is that, I'm not reading the tea leaves. I'm not sure that we have a consensus that would approve this evening. I think we're happy to table it and to see you come back with some different ideas if you're amenable to doing that, or frankly, if maybe I'm reading the tea leaves wrong.
I don't know, maybe we should poll.
Should I take a straw poll? Am I not right on that, or are you guys supporting this?
No, you know, I have the same issue with the bulk, is that if the design is great and it enhances the historic house, then bulk is not an issue. And I think of the Svigos property we just saw where they went over bulk, but it really enhanced the property.
So that's four of us at least anyway, so Jim, I mean, you know, do you think we're on the right track here, or do you think we should just keep going and try to move on this? What do you think, Jen?
I'm in favor of the project.
You're in favor of the project, and Bob?
I think if it were just a little more open on the front side, the bulk would not bother me at all.
Okay, but in terms of being able to make a approval on this evening, are you comfortable that you could support that?
Yeah, I think I could, yes.
So there's two people that actually could support it.
I mean, I'm on the fence, and I could support it. I mean, I could support it if you said, you know, Jim, I went through 4 or 5 iterations, and this is really the best that I came up with. And I think that's why I was asking those kinds of questions earlier, if you didn't leave anything on the table in terms of architectural. And and you really put the best foot forward, I think I'm gonna defer to you on that, and my colleagues, if they feel like that's what's happened in the process that you went through. But it's a tough one for me, because I don't get a sense that if there's some issues on the facing and the height of the wall and the openness and some other things, some tweaks here and there, then I would be open to those things. Kurt, I don't know if you got enough time to talk about your idea around the setback, or was that totally kibosh because you have to connect to the door?
Well, I was grasping for a compromise solution that maybe, if people are comfortable with this, there's no need to go down that path. And I wasn't thinking that people were that comfortable with it. Frankly, I'm not that comfortable with it. And I can't think of, I don't think we have a consensus kind of design opinion that we would send this to a subcommittee and say, well, but for, the subcommittee, we approve it. And here's my concerns on it. My concerns are that we've got kind of a modern window treatment to this very historical home that could work, but I think it has to be very, very craftily handled so that it is that it's almost like the folly of the column. I think this is as controversial as it gets, frankly. It's like the addition to the Lake Forest High School, right? The big glass box addition, right? How do you do that well? You have to really do that well. And I'm not sure it's there. The aluminum framed glass with the heavy timbered construction just kind of, makes me a little bit nervous that it's perfectly resolved, as do the relationships to this breezeway compared to like the window, with the windows on the other side. There's almost this suggested symmetry. It's not supposed to be suggested. It's not intended to be suggested, but there it is. It happens on either side of the front door, but they're different. And so I wonder if they, if they need to be more different. So I don't know, there's something about the way that you handled the original edition pretty well, I think. I think that that elevation reads, it works, you pulled off a challenging little design problem, I think pretty well in the original edition. And I'm not quite comfortable that you've got it resolved quite as well in the new proposal. I know the need is there, but I'm just not sure the cake is baked as well. And, it may be just because you haven't, been sent to the drawing board to detail it all out, and maybe you would do it and it would be perfect. On the back side of the house, I have no concern. I think it could be handled. I think that what you're suggesting is fine. The glass, on the back side of the house doesn't really put me off. You can't see it from the road, doesn't really challenge the architecture of the front of the house. On the front side, I'm just a little worried about it. So I don't know I'm just on the fence. I'm not even on the fence. I just not, I don't think it's a completely done, I don't think it's cooked well enough for me to support it on this kind of a historic home with this kind of a bulk controversy. So that's just where I stand.
Well,
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
There's a lot of good ideas being thrown around tonight, and there is willingness to compromise and to look in. I mean, above everything, the homeowners would like to achieve functionality, and I would like to see that functionality added onto the house in some way. Of course, it can't be at the compromise of the aesthetic. That's important. And I thought I brought forward, a well thought through solution, but I'm hearing some good ideas. And I think, Kurt, what if this were just fenestrated like the pattern of the rest of the house, and we did away with the heavy timbers there? So you had a wall of smaller lights that would match the proportion of the dining room window, and band in between there.
I think it could be, I think that could be a solution. I'd have to see it drawn, and I wouldn't discourage you from exploring that. And frankly, I don't think it has to be, because this is not a perfectly symmetrical solution by any stretch of them, I don't think that it has to be necessarily the same repeat. I think it could be a different size, could be ordered, but I think that to my, just, again, I didn't study it as long as you did, but my knee-jerk reaction to it and, going through it, looking at it tonight is that this part of the house, when you see it from the front of the house, wants to read like a more formal, you know, part of the original architecture of the house. Or if it doesn't, it wants to read like a breezeway, and then resolve it as a breezeway, and that's okay too. But you've kind of split the baby here, and it's not,
Right.
you know, I'm not comfortable that it's done right.
And that kind of goes back to my comment, like, did you look at it more all in,
Yeah.
you know?
But I think it's really
to
hard,
make it-
yeah, it's really hard to just lower the, sorry. Oh, no, you're just
Is
done.
that us or?
That's me. Time's
Usually
up.
that's my computer. I'm so happy to see someone else's computer die in the middle of a presentation.
You know, one last thing
Sure.
is that in order, this is more about process rather than about architecture and the design of this, is it would be helpful to have a subcommittee in this component to say that, you know, there's so much difference of opinion, so I'd take the harshest critic of it and then, you know, Kurt or someone, whoever wants to volunteer their time,
You know,
and sit down with
I
this and
think
at least.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just think based on our comments that the staff could probably work with you and incorporate some of the things that we've said. I don't think we're at the point where, you know, a subcommittee would be appropriate. You know, that's my
Well, I
thought
would
of
tell
it.
you from a process point of view, it's up to staff, I think, and we do from time to time see an advanced look at stuff that's coming to us for a knee-jerk reaction or so I'm not sure that is, you know, like on the train station, for example, the city would share some stuff with us early and say, hey, this is coming, take a look at it, and, you know, and they send it out to the whole committee at one time. That's different than a subcommittee, but there is a process whereby I think they could share some drawings and collect some comments from us. But here's what I would encourage. I would encourage, unless I'm seeing, I got either a tie, I either got a tie or I don't, so.
Well, Ty won't.
Ty doesn't get it passed,
Doesn't get
so
it
Susie,
passed.
I guess I better formally ask you, do you support this or do you want to table this?
At this point, I probably would like to see some more alternatives.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I think we're gonna look for a motion to table this. And what I would do is I would expect you to work with staff, show some ideas, show some generation. And if you get to a point where you are feeling pretty comfortable that staff is really liking something and then, you know, I would say just run with that process and we'll see in a month. If you're getting to a stalemate, then I would consult with them about maybe there's a way for us to get some comments back to the commissioners or
But
get some
there
drawings.
seems like there's kind of two scenarios. There's the minimalist breezeway scenario, that's kind of light connection and less scale. You know, maybe dropping the front wall and opening it up a bit
Yeah.
more and just kind of keeping it whimsical. I love saying that word, whimsical, it's kind of fun. And
We're in a
the
purple
second
tie.
alternative is what you were saying, that in keeping more with the traditional architecture of the main home,
Well, and-
but not necessarily conforming right to it, but a little bit heavier and
Yeah.
more bulk, right? Is that?
Well,
'cause
not
those are
necessarily-
different, those are
I-
opposite
I-
ends.
frankly,
so I
I-
think
Bulk is space.
Frankly, I think that there's more options out there. You know, frankly, a refinement of this option might work. You've got 3 people that are apparently, you know, giving you some latitude on this, just 3 that don't, and there's one more commissioner who's not even here, so who knows what could happen. But I would say that this could benefit from one more look and some further input from staff, and I think you've got some ideas about some ways this could be improved too. So let's leave it at that. I'd like to make a motion for continuance.
I move to continue the petition.
And, is there a second on that?
Second.
So the motion's been made by Commissioner Ransom, seconded by Commissioner Athenson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed to that? All right, so thanks, sorry to drag you through that. This is a tough process, and it's really a wonderful house, so we'd like to see it done well. And, you know, I know that, you know, you're in good hands with Bobby. He's handled it once, so really just, I'd encourage you to just look at that hard, give us some alternates and show them to the staff, and we hope to work with you on that. Thanks.
Thanks.
Kurt, I'm gonna
Thank you.
take a break. Kurt, I'm gonna take-
Sure, please take a quick break before our last presentation.
beautiful house.
It's a great house. Yeah, it's a really great house. I just think the house, I appreciate your comments about,
And then, being a newbie, about the role of
I'm told that the lift system will pick up everything.
I was kind of wondering.
Even if we turn
where
off the lights.
Where we're supposed to stand on these things. And in my mind, I was kind of leaning.
In the Thorndale Manor subdivision located at 1500 North Green Bay Road and 295 to 340 Robinson Drive. There's no commission action on this item, so this is advisory, and we'll ask the staff to quick give us a setup on this agenda item for us. Thanks.
This item is really before you for fun. This isn't something that you need to take action on now, but I think at the suggestion of the architect, the developer and property owner was willing to bring these architectural guidelines forward to you. This subdivision was approved by the Plan Commission, by the City Council in 2008, I think. I know that's in your report. This subdivision was considered by the Plan Commission on a number of occasions. The Plan Commission spent a lot of time on the site, spent a lot of time thinking about trees and design and road widths and the Plan Commission pushed hard on engineering staff to allow a road that, in this development, that didn't quite meet all city standards. So there was really an intent to do something very special here and to really respect not only the house, but the significant area around the house. So since 2008, none of the vacant lots have sold yet, although maybe some sales are close. And again, I think to the developer and the architect's credit, they have put together this set of guidelines to assist potential homeowners, to give them the comfort that they know right at the outset of the purchase and right at the outset of their design process what's expected. They understand that the individual houses, because it's in the historic district, will need to come before the commission, but it seemed like a really good idea to bring the guidelines before you, at least let you get familiar with them, see them. If you have some input for the architect tonight, that would be great. If not, I would also encourage you to email me, and I can certainly forward you comments, or forward your comments later on. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Mr. Dupree and let him introduce what he's put together.
Sure. Well, again, thank you everyone for staying so late this evening. And just to elaborate a little bit further on what Kathy was saying, we've been hired by the Boardmans. They've obviously been working at this development for a long time, but recently have started working with a new realtor who is actually trained as an architect. Has great sensitivity towards these kind of historic homes, and they hired our firm to put together this book of guidelines, really with the intention of being able to say to potential buyers, all of these homes will need to go before the HPC, and it's the intent of the Boardman family that all of the new homes that are built on the property are sympathetic to the original Howard Van Doren Shaw home and gatehouse that's on the property. So the guidebook is really, partly just elaborating on the more technical restrictions on the properties, but then half of the book is really suggesting the type of aesthetics and the type of scale, massing, and vocabulary of architecture that should be incorporated into the homes in order for them to be considered sympathetic. So we're hoping that we can introduce you to these general guidelines, and that if you have any comments, we'd like to incorporate them into this draft and then use this as a tool to use when selling the lots. So really, I'm not necessarily going to be the architect for any of these houses, but I've been asked to serve on the architectural review board for the family. So I kind of see myself as an extension of what you will all ultimately be asking for and reviewing once it comes before you, once it gets to that point. So,
Thanks.
Kathy, maybe this is a question to you or to Austin. Can you tell us how the firm that put together all the design elements to this, how they did it from a process perspective? Did they look at our ordinances and work closely with you? And I'm trying to get a general sense for, is this more restrictive or less restrictive than the design elements? Because one of the things as a homeowner, you're going to come in and you're going to be given a guidebook, and if you're new to this community, you're going to hear lots of different stories about the city and the process and all those kinds of things. And I think context is going to be really important around, if you do all these things, then, it should be easy to get through, or there's different layers of scrutiny. And I think just from my perspective, I want to try to get oriented around that first. And I think that'd be helpful.
Sure, and we're not trying to be redundant or take the place of the HPC process. It's really merely a suggestion, so people know that when they come into this particular development, it's not design whatever you want regardless of context. So it's really being more suggestive, but we'll really reference the HPC guidelines specifically to say this is what you actually must conform to. And really in the broader context of just the Green Bay Historic Corridor, I think this guidebook really specifically relates to Howard Van Doren Shaw, Jens Jensen, and goes beyond just being historic to Lake Forest, but historic to Thorndale Manor, if that answers your question.
I would just add that although Conway Farms is not in the historic district, Conway Farms had a very similar document. They had very detailed architectural guidelines, and that process worked very well. They had their own architectural review board. What I see this process doing is really making your job simpler, but more importantly, again, setting realistic expectations. I know that the developer and architect are working closely with a realtor so that people are coming in understanding what this subdivision is about. And I think one thing we hear is that sometimes people buy properties, they don't even know the property's in the historic district. They don't have any sense of neighborhood context. So I think with this project, they are taking the initiative to really set the stage to make this a success. So I think they are making your job and certainly making our job easier, so.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of in a soft way introducing them to the historic nature of the property and certainly letting them know that Lake Forest cares about preservation, and the HPC will be scrutinizing each one of these designs. So
is your intent to be a little bit more specific in this document for homeowners, so when they come to the HPC, it's not a shock?
I think the idea that Kathy and I have been talking about is that we would help introduce them to staff as part of this process. But we don't want to be too restrictive in this document and say you must have so many dormers, they must look like this. The language in the document really constantly says encourages or discourages. Yeah. So we're generally just trying to promote sympathetic vocabulary and scale and things like that.
I would say that because I think, I read the thing. I think this is a really difficult thing to do, and so you can imagine you've been dealing with the historic preservation ordinance in Lake Forest for a long time. But our ordinance is not designed around encouraging one kind of landscape style or another, or one kind of building style or another, whereas the undertone of this document is that, hey, Howard Van Doren Shaw was a good guy. We should think about doing stuff like he did, and Jens Jensen did nice landscape work. We should think about doing stuff like they did. And then you specifically talk about elements, hip roofs and things like that, but I don't ever see the kind of the push towards, hey, we would really particularly like you to do informal landscapes except for in a formal area or something like that. What's the where, because as I read this, I'm concerned with over time whether the people that are enforcing this can be arbitrary or not. And our code spends a lot of time trying not to be arbitrary by pointing to various elements of, the tests of what we're supposed to be looking at to try not to be arbitrary. But it also doesn't encourage one style or another, whereas this, I think the undertone is that you do kind of have a style that you'd prefer, and here's the pictures of it,
Right.
But it doesn't say you have to do this,
Yeah.
right? So, but at the end of the day, you get to a point where my caution would be, as you're writing this and implementing this, be careful that you don't create a document that becomes too arbitrary or that
too
could be
prescriptive.
interpreted as being arbitrary. And then the other question that I have for you, or just comment that I have for you is, which we don't ever do this, but you do, and I understand why you do, you've got this approval of builders section. And that's another one where I think, I'm not sure it belongs in this document. That might be its own document.
Right. And that's a carryover from, I think, some of the documents that the family had put together.
But I suspect
originally.
that that's really something that the land seller would want to make sure they enforce under the initial construction of the homes in the subdivision. But going forward beyond that, I'm not sure you want to put the review board in charge of approving contractors, because what happens if somebody buys a lot, has a contractor, and then, he's a licensed contractor, he's fully capable, licensed, and somebody just, there's no criteria other than they can just say no.
Right.
Which is great if you're selling the land, but it's not so great if you've bought the lot.
Yeah, it's kind of a delicate balance between,
Exactly.
it's all privately owned land and it will be sold. So there are you know, some things that the family would like to see. And then
I'd
obviously
think about creating a separate document for that, for the initial build-out. I mean, that's just my suggestion on that.
Sure.
Obviously, you do what you want.
Sure.
And then I do view this as being slightly more restrictive than our ordinance, only from the standpoint that it is encouraging a particular kind of, you know, solution, I think.
But I see,
It's not bad.
again, I don't think that's bad if,
Not at all.
if the development has a character to it
That's the
that they wanna,
expectation.
you know, and so I like it that way, and I'm not feeling, you know, it being as arbitrary as, you know, it may be perceived.
Well,
I can see it being perceived in some way.
I'm not worried about the initial build-out because the idea would be that the same group of folks are reviewing 10 houses or whatever it is, right? But over 20 years, the board will continue to change. The people who are involved in it will be continuing to change. And we're talking about a very, you know, small group of folks.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, in Lake Forest, we have the luxury of picking from a huge community and still can't come up with 6 people that agree.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and
So-
you know, one thing I just brought up earlier too, you know, the manor house on this property, I think the Boardman family certainly wants that to remain kind of the most important landmark feature on the property. So I think the encouragement of a certain vocabulary is really a response to making sure that it's respectful of that landmark
And
piece of
that's, and that's
architecture.
great. I think that's great. Yeah.
So how do you
So-
teach compatibility, the whole idea of compatibility?
Yeah, and contextualism and really, you
Right.
know, localized contextualism versus historic in the context of Lake Forest as a wide range
Yeah.
of.
I think you could be more,
definition.
I think you could be more overt in that intention here. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I think maybe for a homeowner's perspective, and I think of my experience with the Building Review Board and Middle Fork, where they were really restrictive on their ARB, so by the time it got to BRB, a lot of the issues were kind of worked through, you know. So I'm thinking maybe more specific you are on this, and maybe even some, like when you're talking about elements, you add some more photos, so this is what you're talking about. Maybe that would help guide them to compatibility.
Well, and what I'm hearing too, maybe it's more elaborating on the philosophy
I think that
rather
would help,
than
rather
specific
than,
going
yeah,
through
no, I agree.
each architectural element.
Give the architects some latitude to come up with some great stuff, but tell them, you know, this is the direction we expect you to take. You know, we don't
Sure.
want to see a flat roofed guy with glass, whatever it is.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and again, just being more broad and philosophical about what we're trying to achieve.
That's great.
Good.
Great. Is that helpful? Any other comments?
Should we give, I had specific
Sure.
comments, so anyway, I
Sure.
read,
Why not?
sure, I read this and then I visited the site and I had some, a reaction to it, so I thought I'd
Great.
share those with you.
Great.
So when I reviewed the landscape design standards, I thought that perhaps you might want to specifically encourage use of indigenous species and their cultivars, and specifically discourage use of non-native plants that might be deemed less desirable. Then I thought, in terms of fences and hedges, that section might specifically discourage use of stockade-type fencing, which is not in accord with the City of Lake Forest design standards. In terms of exterior lighting standards, I thought that you might want to consider in some way specifically calling for implementation of best standards for preservation of dark skies or the right to night. Because, I mean, that's an important aspect of the experience, I think, is darkness at night. And then one thing I noted is I was very excited to inspect the site, and it's an amazing place, but I was unable to access lots 3, 4, and 5 because there's a barricade. So I just mentioned that.
So actually, fences is a really good catch, because we talk about fences all the time, as you know, up here, and we have wide latitude in the City of Lake Forest on fences, and of course, it causes us heartburn all the time at the intersection of those two fences. So that, I second that. You know, you might think about fences a little as being even more restrictive than normal. And you
Yeah.
might- as I think
Making
that-
them a more consistent
That's a way
feature.
that's a way to really encourage the character of a specific subdivision. If you adopt a singular kind of solution for fences, or even a couple of, you know, solutions that work together well, because that's where we do have, you know, pinch points in Lake Forest when we have one kind of fence that looks really good on that lot, and then it comes right up against somebody else's
Sure.
really good-looking fence put together that don't look so good.
I don't want to pile on, but could I make one comment
Sure.
with respect to that, which is the Historic Preservation Foundation a few months ago made a presentation to us on fence practices in Lake Forest, and there was a PowerPoint presentation associated with that, and it was really interesting and thought-provoking, I thought, and perhaps people might want to consider getting a copy of that from the foundation.
Great.
Well, I just wanted to add one more thing. I have a whole list of things I can probably pass on to you through Kathy, just about how you can add to some of these design elements or these comments that you have in here. But what I think you want to try to achieve is to avoid a surprise if your homeowner is coming to our board. So if you can give them a hint of what you might be looking for instance, like when you're talking about awnings, and, or even shutters, like, say, we always like the operable shutters with the real hardware, and, if you can add some of those details into your guidelines.
Yeah, we try to suggest that at least the shutters should appear that they
Right, so when they
operate.
come before us and we say, oh, you need the real hardware, and they're like, what? So
Yeah,
I have a
that's
few
good.
comments I can probably pass on to Kathy, but
Great.
I think maybe instead of just, you can be theoretical, but I think you need to also help them when they come to this process by being a little bit more specific in certain areas.
Right. No, I was thinking more of an introductory kind of philosophy, but then getting into the specifics, just to explain to them where we're coming from. We're not just looking for X, Y, and Z, but I mean, you'll also be looking for more just being contextual and
Right, instead of using the word like traditional, use something compatible with, Howard Van Doren Shaw or something, because traditional can be interpreted so many different ways. But what do you really mean by traditional? Think about defining that a little bit more specific.
All right, any other comments for Austin? All right, well, good luck with that.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate the comments. Thanks, guys.
All right, now is an opportunity for the public to address the Historic Preservation Commission on any non-agenda items, if we have any. And I don't see any. So, is there any further comments from staff? I would introduce a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved by Commissioner Ransom, seconded by Commissioner Travers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, good evening, and that passes. Thanks.
Let's get the homeowners